Adela, a 24-year-old construction worker from the poorest district of Detroit, carries heavy concrete blocks under the scorching sun, her body covered in dust and sweat. Despite her own gnawing hunger and the burden of caring for her dying mother, a former nurse denied her retirement benefits. She shares her last piece of bread with Michael Sylvester, a homeless beggar everyone else ignores. What she doesn't know is that this beggar is actually a billionaire medical philanthropist conducting a test of human compassion. When he returns the next day to reveal his identity and propose marriage, she's already gone. What follows is a heart-wrenching journey of missed connections, parallel struggles, and a stunning revelation. The sun burned hot over the construction site in Detroit's poorest district. Adela Martinez, 24 years old, lifted another concrete block onto her shoulder. Her orange construction dress, once bright, was now stained with cement dust, dirt, and sweat. Her arms trembled from exhaustion. Her dark hair clung to her forehead in wet strands. She had been working since 6 a.m. It was now 2 p.m. She had not eaten anything since the night before, a small portion of rice she shared with her mother. Adela was one of only 3 women working on the site. The men called her Stone Girl because she never complained. She carried blocks that some men struggled with. She worked harder than anyone, not because she loved construction, but because she had no choice. Her mother, Rosa Martinez, was dying. Stage 4 cancer. The doctors said she had maybe 3 months left. Rosa was a retired nurse who had worked for 35 years at Detroit General Hospital. But after she retired, the hospital went bankrupt. Her pension never came. Her retirement benefits were blocked in endless legal battles. Now Rosa needed cancer treatment that cost $15,000 per month. Adela's construction job paid $850 a week. She worked every day, even Sundays, picking up extra shifts. But it was never enough. As closing time approached, Adela's supervisor handed her the day's payment in cash, $120. She held it tightly. This money would buy her mother's pain medication for 5 days. Maybe some food. Maybe pay part of the electric bill. She walked slowly toward the roadside food stall. Her stomach growled so loudly that a man passing by turned to look at her. She felt embarrassed. But hunger has no dignity. At the stall, she bought 1 piece of bread and a small bottle of water. That was all she could afford. She planned to eat half the bread now and save the other half for tomorrow morning. Adela sat on the broken sidewalk, holding the piece of bread in her trembling hands. Her stomach felt like it was eating itself from the inside. She had worked for 8 straight hours carrying concrete blocks, and her body screamed for food. This bread and small bottle of water cost her $12, money she desperately needed for her mother's medication. She was about to take her first bite when she heard the voice. "Please, miss, I haven't eaten in 3 days." She looked up slowly. A man sat slumped against the wall about 10 feet away. His clothes were torn and filthy. His face was covered with a thick, matted beard. His hands shook as he reached out weakly toward passers-by. Most people walked past him without even looking. Some crossed to the other side of the street to avoid him entirely. Adela felt her chest tighten. She looked down at her bread, then back at the man. She told herself to look away. She told herself she had her own problems. Her mother was dying. She was starving too. She couldn't save everyone. She turned her head and started to stand up, clutching her bread tightly. But her feet wouldn't move. Something held her in place. She remembered her mother's words from years ago, when Adela was young, and they would see homeless people on the streets. "Mija," her mother would say, "never forget that everyone you see is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Kindness costs nothing, but it can save a life." Adela closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She looked at the beggar again. His eyes were hollow, defeated. He had stopped asking people for help. He just sat there, staring at the ground, as if he had given up completely. She walked over to him slowly. As she got closer, she could see he was older than she first thought, maybe in his late 50s or early 60s. His hands were scarred and weathered. His breathing was shallow. "Sir," she said softly, He looked up at her with surprise, as if he couldn't believe someone was actually speaking to him. I only have this piece of bread, Adela continued, but I want to share it with you. She broke the bread in half and held out the larger piece to him. The man stared at the bread, then at her face. His lips began to tremble. Miss No, he said, his voice cracking. You look like you need it more than I do. Your clothes, your face, you've been working hard. Please keep it. Adela shook her head firmly. Sir, when I look at you, I see someone who needs help. And when someone needs help, I have to give what I can. Please take it. She pressed the bread into his dirty hand. He held it like it was made of gold. Tears began streaming down his face, cutting clean lines through the dirt on his cheeks. God bless you, he whispered. What's your name?
Adela.
Adela Martinez. I'm Michael, he said quietly. Thank you, Adela. You don't know what this means to me. She nodded, gave him a gentle smile, and walked away with her half of the bread. She didn't eat it immediately. She put it in her pocket and started the long walk home. Her stomach still hurt from hunger, but somehow her heart felt lighter. What Adela didn't see was Michael watching her disappear into the crowd, his eyes following her every step. He whispered to himself, Who is this woman? Who raised someone with such a pure heart? He ate the bread slowly, savoring every bite, not because he was hungry, but because it represented something he had been searching for desperately and had almost given up finding. When Adela finally reached her small apartment, she found her mother lying on the old couch, covered with a thin blanket. Rosa's face looked pale and sunken. The cancer was winning. Mama, I'm home, Adela said softly. Rosa opened her eyes slowly and smiled weakly. Mija, how was work? It was fine, Mama. I brought you your medicine. Adela pulled out a small bottle of pills from her bag and handed her mother 2 tablets with a glass of water. Rosa swallowed the pills with difficulty. Did you eat today, Adela? Adela lied with a smile. Yes, Mama. I ate at the construction site. Good, Rosa said, closing her eyes again. You work too hard, my baby. You need to eat well. Adela sat beside her mother and held her hand. She pulled out the half piece of bread from her pocket and ate it slowly, trying to make it last as long as possible. As she chewed, she thought about the homeless man, Michael. She wondered where he would sleep tonight. She wondered if anyone else would help him. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, that same homeless man would return looking for her. She had no idea that he wasn't homeless at all. And she certainly had no idea that the simple act of sharing half a piece of bread was about to turn her entire world upside down. The next morning, Adela woke up at 5:30, just like she did every day. Her body ached from yesterday's work, but she forced herself out of bed. She checked on her mother, who was still sleeping, then quickly washed her face with cold water and changed into her work clothes. She left the apartment quietly and began the 40-minute walk to the construction site. She couldn't afford the bus fare anymore. Every dollar had to go toward her mother's treatment. As she walked through the early morning streets, she passed the spot where she had met Michael yesterday. He wasn't there. The sidewalk was empty except for a few other homeless people sleeping in doorways. She hoped he had found somewhere safe to spend the night. Work began as soon as she arrived. The foreman handed out assignments, and Adela was sent to the 3rd floor to carry cement bags. Each bag weighed 50 pounds. She had to carry them up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. By noon, her shoulders felt like they were on fire. What Adela didn't know was that at that exact moment, a luxury black car pulled up to the construction site entrance. Michael Sylvester stepped out, but he looked completely different from the day before. He wore an expensive gray suit that fit him perfectly. His beard was neatly trimmed. His hair was clean and styled. He looked like a completely different person, powerful, confident, wealthy. Behind him stepped a young man in a crisp white shirt, carrying a leather folder. This was James, Michael's personal assistant. Are you sure this is the right location, sir? James asked, looking at the dusty construction site with skepticism.
Positive, Michael said.
She works here. Her name is Adela Martinez. Find her and bring her to me. James nodded and walked toward the site supervisor's office. Michael waited by the car, his heart beating fast with anticipation. He had spent the entire evening and morning preparing for this moment. He had rehearsed what he would say. He had planned everything perfectly. Last night, after Adela had given him that bread, Michael had gone back to his penthouse apartment in downtown Detroit. He had showered, changed, and sat in his study thinking about what had happened. For 6 months, he had been conducting a personal experiment. He had disguised himself as a homeless beggar and traveled to different neighborhoods, observing how people treated those they considered beneath them. He had been rejected hundreds of times. People had cursed at him, spat near him, kicked him, told him to get a job, called him a waste of space. He had almost lost faith in humanity entirely. He had almost concluded that genuine compassion was dead in this world. But then Adela appeared. A woman who clearly had nothing. A woman who was suffering herself. And yet she stopped. She shared her last meal. She treated him with dignity and respect. Michael had made his decision immediately. This was the woman he had been searching for. This was someone with a pure heart. This was someone worthy of his love, his trust, his fortune. He would marry her. He would take care of her. He would give her everything she deserved. Now, as he waited by the car, James returned with a site supervisor, a heavy-set man named Frank. "Mr. Sylvester, I'm sorry," Frank said nervously, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But Adela Martinez didn't show up for work today." Michael's face fell. "What do you mean she didn't show up?" "She's not here, sir. She's been working here for 3 months, and she's never missed a day. But today she didn't come. I tried calling the number she gave us, but it's disconnected." Michael felt panic rising in his chest. "Do you have her address?" Frank hesitated. "Sir, I can't just give out employee information." Michael pulled out his wallet and handed Frank $500 bills. "I need her address.
Now."
It's urgent." Frank stared at the money, then quickly pulled out a worn notebook from his pocket. He flipped through the pages and found Adela's information. "She lives at 247 Jefferson Street, apartment 3C. "But sir, that's in the Riverside district. It's not a safe area." "I don't care," Michael said, already heading back to the car. "James, let's go." The car sped through the streets of Detroit, heading toward the Riverside district. Michael's mind raced with questions. Why hadn't she come to work? Was she okay? Had something happened to her? When they arrived at 247 Jefferson Street, Michael's heart sank. The building looked like it was barely standing. The walls were covered in graffiti. Several windows were broken and covered with cardboard. The front door hung loosely on its hinges. Michael and James climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled of mold and garbage. When they reached apartment 3C, Michael knocked firmly on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. "Maybe she's not home," James suggested. Michael knocked a 3rd time. Finally, he heard a weak voice from inside. "Who is it?" "My name is Michael. I'm looking for Adela Martinez." There was a long pause. Then the door opened slightly, held by a chain lock. An elderly woman's face appeared in the gap. She looked very sick, her skin pale, and her eyes tired. "Adela is not here," the woman said softly. "Who are you? What do you want with my daughter?" Michael's heart raced. "Ma'am, my name is Michael Sylvester. I met your daughter yesterday, and I need to speak with her. It's very important." The woman studied his face carefully. "You're wearing an expensive suit. My daughter doesn't know people like you. Are you from the hospital? Are you here to collect money? Because we don't have any." "No, ma'am, I'm not here for money. I'm here to help. Please, where is Adela?" Rosa hesitated, then said, "She went to the free clinic on Maple Street. I had a very bad night. High fever.
Pain.
She took me there early this morning. We've been there since 6 a.m., waiting to see a doctor." Michael turned to James immediately. "Find out where the free clinic on Maple Street is. We're going there right now." "Sir," James said carefully, "you have a board meeting in 30 minutes. "Cancel it," Michael said firmly. "Cancel everything for today. This is more important." They rushed back to the car and drove to the free clinic. It was a small, overcrowded building with peeling paint and a waiting room packed with people sitting on plastic chairs. Michael walked in and scanned the room quickly, searching for Adela. But she wasn't there. He asked the receptionist about Adela Martinez. She was here, the receptionist said, checking her computer. But she left about 20 minutes ago. Her mother was admitted for observation. The daughter went to get medication from the pharmacy across the street. Michael practically ran across the street to the pharmacy. But when he got there, the pharmacist told him that Adela had already left. She had picked up the medication and rushed back to work because she was already 5 hours late. Michael felt frustration building in his chest. He had just missed her again. He returned to the construction site, but Frank told him that Adela had called saying she would come in tomorrow instead because she needed to stay with her mother. For the first time in years, Michael Sylvester felt completely powerless. He had billions of dollars. He had connections everywhere. He could make phone calls and move mountains. But he couldn't find one woman in his own city. As he sat in his car, staring out at the construction site, he made a decision. He would not give up. He would find Adela Martinez. And when he did, he would tell her everything. He would ask her to marry him. And he would make sure she never had to struggle again for a single day in her life. 3 weeks passed. 3 long, agonizing weeks where Michael searched for Adela like a man possessed. He returned to the construction site every single day, but Adela never came back. Frank told him that she had called to say her mother was too sick and she couldn't leave her alone. She had to quit the job. Michael left his phone number with Frank, begging him to give it to Adela if she ever called again. But the call never came. He went back to the apartment on Jefferson Street 5 different times. Each time, the door was locked and no one answered. Neighbors told him they had seen the daughter leaving early in the morning and coming back late at night, but they didn't know where she went. Michael hired a private investigator to find her. But Adela seemed to have disappeared completely. She didn't have social media accounts. She didn't have a registered phone number. She didn't have a bank account. She lived completely off the grid, working cash jobs and surviving day by day. Meanwhile, Adela had no idea that anyone was looking for her. She had completely forgotten about the homeless man she met that day. Her entire world revolved around one thing: keeping her mother alive. After quitting the construction job, Adela had found work at a late-night diner washing dishes. The pay was terrible, only $70 a night, but it allowed her to be home during the day to take care of Rosa. She would wake up at 6 a.m., give her mother breakfast and medicine, clean the apartment, then try to rest for a few hours before going to work at 10 p.m. She worked until 6 a.m., then came home and started the cycle all over again. Rosa's condition was getting worse. The free clinic had given her some basic pain medication, but it wasn't enough. The cancer was spreading aggressively. Rosa needed chemotherapy, radiation, specialized drugs. But all of that cost money Adela didn't have. One night, as Adela was washing dishes at the diner, her manager approached her. "Adela, there's a man here asking for you." Her heart skipped a beat. She dried her hands quickly and walked out to the dining area. A well-dressed man in his 30s stood near the counter. It was James, Michael's assistant, though Adela didn't know that. "Are you Adela Martinez?" James asked politely. "Yes, who are you?" "My name is James. I work for someone who's been looking for you. A man named Michael Sylvester." Adela frowned, confused. "I don't know anyone by that name." James pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It was Michael in his suit, clean and professional. Adela stared at the photo, but shook her head. "I'm sorry, I don't know this person." James felt frustrated. "Ma'am, are you sure?" He said, "He met you about 3 weeks ago. He said you gave him food." Suddenly, a vague memory flickered in Adela's mind. The homeless man, the piece of bread. But the man in the photo looked nothing like the beggar she had helped. "Wait," she said slowly. 3 weeks ago, I helped a homeless man, but he looked nothing like this person in the photo." James's eyes lit up. That was him. He was in disguise. "He's been searching for you everywhere. He wants to meet you urgently." Adela felt confused and suspicious. Why would a rich man disguise himself as a homeless person? And why would he be looking for me? I don't know all the details, ma'am. But my boss is a very important man. He wants to thank you properly for your kindness. Please, can you meet with him? Adela shook her head firmly. I don't have time for this. My mother is dying and I need to work. I'm sorry, but please tell your boss I appreciate the thought, but I can't meet with him. Ma'am, please. I said no. Now I have to get back to work or I'll lose this job. Adela turned and walked back into the kitchen before James could say anything else. James stood there, stunned. He pulled out his phone and called Michael immediately. Sir, I found her. She's working at a diner called Eddie's Place on Roosevelt Avenue. I'm on my way, Michael said, and the line went dead. Michael arrived at the diner 15 minutes later. He walked in wearing jeans and a simple black jacket, trying not to look too formal. But when he got to the kitchen and asked for Adela, the manager told him she had just left. She got an emergency call, the manager explained. Something about her mother. She ran out of here like the building was on fire. Michael felt his heart sink again. Another missed connection. He got Adela's home address from James and drove straight to Jefferson Street. But when he arrived, he saw an ambulance parked outside the building. Paramedics were carrying someone on a stretcher down the stairs. Michael ran up to them. Wait, is that Rosa Martinez? One of the paramedics nodded.
Yes.
Stage 4 cancer patient. We're taking her to Detroit General. Where's her daughter? She's riding with us in the ambulance. Michael watched helplessly as the ambulance drove away, sirens blaring. He wanted to follow, but he knew this wasn't the right moment. Adela's mother was in crisis. The last thing Adela needed right now was a stranger approaching her at the hospital. So Michael made another decision. If he couldn't reach Adela directly, he would help her mother. He would use his connections, his wealth, his influence to make sure Rosa Martinez got the best medical care possible. Michael Sylvester wasn't just rich. He was one of the most influential medical philanthropists in the country. 5 years ago, after recovering from a life-threatening illness as a child, an illness that the medical system had almost failed to treat, Michael had dedicated his life to improving healthcare. He had built 3 state-of-the-art hospitals. He funded medical research. He sponsored free clinics and medical outreach programs. Now, he would use all of that power to save Rosa Martinez. Not just because he wanted to impress Adela, but because saving people was what he did. And if Adela was even half as good as she seemed, then her mother must be an extraordinary woman too. The next morning, Michael made a phone call to Dr. Patricia Chen, the director of Detroit General Hospital. Patricia, I need a favor. There's a patient in your hospital, Rosa Martinez. I want her transferred to Sylvester Medical Center immediately. I want her put under the care of Dr. Okonkwo, the oncology specialist. Cost is not an issue. I'm covering everything. Dr. Chen was surprised. Michael, who is this patient? Do you know her? Not yet, Michael said. But I will. Just make sure she gets the best care possible. Of course. I'll arrange the transfer today. What Michael didn't know was that this transfer would lead to a revelation that would shock them both. A revelation that connected Michael, Rosa, and Adela in ways none of them could have imagined. A connection that had been waiting 25 years to be discovered. Rosa Martinez opened her eyes slowly in the hospital room. Everything looked blurry at first, but gradually her vision cleared. She saw white walls, medical equipment beeping softly, and sunlight coming through a window. This wasn't Detroit General. The room was too clean, too modern, too expensive. Adela sat in a chair beside the bed, her head resting on the edge of the mattress, fast asleep. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled. She had clearly been there all night.
Mia, Rosa whispered weakly.
Adela's eyes flew open.
Mama.
You're awake. She grabbed her mother's hand carefully, tears streaming down her face. Thank God, Mama. You scared me so much. Where are we? Rosa asked, looking around confused. I don't know exactly. The doctors at Detroit General said someone arranged for you to be transferred here. They called it Sylvester Medical Center. Mama, this is a private hospital. It's one of the best in the country. But I don't understand why they brought you here. I can't afford this place. Before Rosa could respond, a nurse walked in. She smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Martinez. I'm so glad you're awake. Dr. Okonkwo will be here shortly to check on you." "Wait." Adela stood up quickly. "Can someone please explain what's happening? Who authorized this transfer? And who's paying for all this?" The nurse's smile didn't waver. "I'm sorry, miss. I don't have those details. But I do know that all of your mother's medical expenses have been covered by a private donor. You don't need to worry about the cost." Adela felt dizzy. "A private donor? Who? Why would anyone do that for us?" "I don't know, miss. But Dr. Okonkwo might have more information." 10 minutes later, a tall African man in his 50s entered the room. He wore a white coat and had kind eyes that radiated both intelligence and compassion. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm Dr. Okonkwo. I'm an oncologist specializing in advanced cancer treatment. I've reviewed your medical history, and I want to start you on an aggressive treatment plan immediately. We're going to fight this disease with everything we have." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "Doctor, I appreciate this, but my daughter and I don't have money for treatment. There's been some mistake." Dr. Okonkwo shook his head gently. "There's no mistake. Your treatment has been fully sponsored by the hospital's founder, Mr. Michael Sylvester. He personally requested that we provide you with the highest level of care." Adela felt her legs weaken. She sat down slowly. "Michael Sylvester? That name, someone mentioned that name to me. But I don't know him. Why would he do this?" "I don't know the full story," Dr. Okonkwo admitted. "But Mr. Sylvester doesn't do anything randomly. If he's chosen to help your mother, there's a reason." Over the next 2 hours, Dr. Okonkwo explained Rosa's treatment plan in detail. Chemotherapy, targeted radiation, immunotherapy, drugs, nutritional support. Everything Rosa needed. Everything Adela had prayed for but couldn't afford. As the doctor left, Adela turned to her mother. "Mama, do you know this Michael Sylvester?" Rosa's face went pale. Her hands began to tremble. "Michael Sylvester," she whispered slowly. "That name? Adela, what did the man look like?" "I don't know, Mama. I've never met him. But his assistant showed me a photo. He looked like he was maybe in his late 50s or early 60s. Well-dressed. Successful." Rosa closed her eyes, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "It can't be. It's impossible." "Mama, what is it? Do you know him?" Rosa took a shaky breath. "Mija, I need to tell you a story. A story I've never told you before. It happened 25 years ago when I was working at County Memorial Hospital." Adela sat down and held her mother's hand.
"I'm listening, Mama."
"I was a night nurse in the pediatric intensive care unit. One night, they brought in a young boy, maybe 10 years old. His name was Michael Sylvester. He came from a very wealthy family. His father was a real estate developer." Rosa's voice grew distant as she remembered. "The boy was dying, Adela. He had contracted a rare blood infection. The doctors tried everything: antibiotics, transfusions, experimental treatments. Nothing worked. His fever kept climbing. His organs were starting to fail. The doctors told his parents to prepare for the worst." "What happened?" Adela asked quietly. "I couldn't just watch that child die. I had grown up in a small village in Mexico before I came to America. My grandmother was a curandera, a healer. She taught me about herbs and natural medicines. I remembered a remedy she used for severe infections, a combination of specific herbs boiled in a certain way." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "I knew I could lose my job. I knew I could get in serious trouble. But I couldn't let that boy die without trying. So one night, when no one was watching, I prepared the herbal remedy and gave it to him through his just a little bit, mixed with his regular medication." "Mama, that was so dangerous," Adela said, shocked. "I know. But the next morning, something miraculous happened. Michael's fever broke. His infection markers started dropping. Within 3 days, he was stable. Within a week, he was recovering. The doctors called it a spontaneous remission. They said it was medically unexplainable. But I knew what had happened." "Did you tell anyone?" Rosa shook her head. "I couldn't. I would have been fired and maybe arrested for administering unauthorized treatment. But Michael's father overheard me talking to another nurse about herbal medicine one day. He confronted me in the hallway and accused me of experimenting on his son. He was furious. But you saved his son's life. He didn't see it that way. He saw a nurse who broke protocol. He threatened to have my nursing license revoked. He said I was a reckless immigrant who endangered his child. I was terrified. Adela. I begged him not to report me. I told him I only wanted to help. What did he do?
He didn't report me.
But he made sure I was transferred out of that hospital. I lost my job there and had to start over at Detroit General. I never saw Michael Sylvester again. I heard years later that his father died in a car accident when Michael was in his 20s. But I never knew what happened to the boy. Adela sat in stunned silence, processing everything. Mama, do you think this is the same Michael? I don't know. It was so long ago. He would be 35 now, not in his late 50s. Unless... Rosa paused, thinking hard. Unless the man you saw is someone else. Or unless I'm remembering the age wrong. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Both women looked up as it opened slowly. A man walked in. He was tall, well-built, with gray touches in his neatly trimmed hair. He wore an expensive suit, but his eyes were gentle, almost vulnerable. He stopped just inside the doorway and looked directly at Rosa. For a long moment, no one spoke. Rosa stared at the man, her eyes growing wider and wider. Her hand went to her mouth. "It's you," she whispered. "Michael. You're all grown up." Michael's eyes filled with tears. He nodded slowly.
Illo, Nurs Rosa.
It's been 25 years. The hospital room felt frozen in time. Adela looked back and forth between her mother and the stranger, trying to understand what was happening. Michael took a few slow steps closer to Rosa's bed. "I've been searching for you for 15 years, he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Ever since I was 20 years old and finally understood what you did for me. What you risked for me." Rosa's tears flowed freely now. "You were just a little boy.
So sick.
I couldn't let you die." "My father never told me the truth," Michael continued. "He just said I recovered naturally. But after he died, I found his old journals.
He wrote about you.
About the herbal treatment. About how he threatened you and forced you out of the hospital." Michael's hands clenched into fists. "When I read those words, I was horrified. Ashamed. You saved my life, and my father repaid you with cruelty. I started searching for you immediately. I went to every hospital in Detroit. I hired investigators. But you had changed hospitals so many times, and you got married and changed your name. The trail went cold." Adela finally found her voice.
"Wait.
"You're telling me my mother saved your life when you were a child?" Michael turned to look at Adela for the first time since entering the room. His eyes widened in recognition. "And you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're the woman from the street. The one who gave me bread." Adela stared at him, confused.
What?
"No, that was a homeless." She stopped mid-sentence as the memory clicked into place. The beggar. The matted beard. The torn clothes. She looked at Michael's face, imagining him dirty and disheveled, and suddenly she saw it. The same eyes. The same voice. "That was you?" she asked in disbelief. Michael nodded. "I disguised myself. I've been doing it for months, testing people. Trying to find someone with genuine compassion. And then I found you." "But why?" "Because I wanted to find someone real. Someone who would help a stranger even when they had nothing to give. Someone who proved that goodness still exists in this world." He paused, taking a deep breath. "And I wanted to ask you to marry me." The words hung in the air like thunder. Adela felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "You wanted to what?" she asked, certain she had heard wrong. "I wanted to ask you to marry me," Michael repeated, more firmly this time. "I know it sounds insane. I know we just met. But I've been looking for someone like you my entire life. Someone with a pure heart. Someone who gives even when it costs them everything." Adela shook her head vigorously, backing away. This is crazy. You don't even know me. I don't know you. You can't just propose to someone because they gave you half a piece of bread. I know it seems sudden. Seems sudden? It is sudden. And it's ridiculous. Adela's voice rose with emotion. You're a billionaire. I'm a construction worker who washes dishes at night. We live in completely different worlds. What you're suggesting doesn't make any sense. Rosa spoke up weakly from the bed. Adela, calm down. Let him explain. But Adela couldn't calm down. Everything was too much. Too fast. Her mother dying. The mysterious transfer to this expensive hospital. The homeless man who wasn't homeless. And now a marriage proposal from a stranger. I need air, Adela said, her voice shaking. She turned and walked quickly out of the room. Michael moved to follow her, but Rosa's voice stopped him. Let her go. She needs time to process this. Michael turned back to Rosa, his face full of anguish. I've ruined everything. I should have approached this differently.
Rosa smiled sadly.
You're the same impulsive boy I remember. You always wanted to fix everything immediately. Michael sat down in the chair beside Rosa's bed. I've made so many mistakes. The disguise. The secret search. The sudden proposal. I thought I was being romantic, but I was just being foolish. You were trying to do something good, Rosa said gently. You were trying to help people. But, Michael, you have to understand something about my daughter. She's been struggling her whole life. She's learned not to trust easy solutions or fairy tale promises. She thinks the world is a hard place that only takes, never gives. But I want to give her everything. I want to take care of both of you. I know. But you can't force compassion to be reciprocated with obligation. Adela gave you that bread freely, expecting nothing in return. That's what made it beautiful. Now you're trying to repay her with marriage, money, security. Can't you see how that changes everything? Michael was quiet for a long moment. I never thought of it that way. You're a good man, Michael. I can see that. You grew up well despite your father's hardness. But if you truly care for my daughter, you need to slow down. Let her know you as a person, not as a billionaire savior. What should I do? Rosa thought carefully. Start by being honest. Tell her your whole story. Help her understand why you did what you did. And then let her choose, freely, without pressure. Michael nodded slowly. You're right. Thank you, Nurse Rosa. You're still saving lives, even now.
Rosa smiled.
I'm just a tired old woman who got lucky that the boy she saved grew up to be a good man. Meanwhile, Adela had made her way to the hospital's garden courtyard. She sat on a bench, her head in her hands, trying to make sense of everything. A homeless man was a billionaire. The billionaire was a child her mother had saved. And now he wanted to marry her. It was too much. Too strange. Too overwhelming. She thought about her life up until this moment. Years of struggling. Years of watching her mother work herself to exhaustion. Years of hoping that maybe someday things would get better. And now this man appeared, offering to solve all her problems with money and marriage. But Adela didn't want to be saved like a princess in a fairy tale. She wanted to earn her own way. She wanted to be strong. She wanted to prove that she didn't need anyone's charity. And yet, her mother was dying. And this man, this strange billionaire, was offering her mother a chance to live. Could she really refuse that out of pride? She sat there for a long time, thinking, crying, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions in her chest. 3 days passed. Adela didn't leave the hospital. Dr. Okonkwo had started Rosa's treatment immediately, and while the chemotherapy made her mother weak and nauseous, there were already small signs of improvement. Rosa's pain levels had decreased. Her appetite was slowly returning. Most importantly, she was stable. Michael kept his distance, respecting Adela's need for space. But he made sure everything Rosa needed was provided immediately. The best meals, private nursing care, entertainment to keep her spirits up. He arranged for a comfortable bed to be brought into Rosa's room so Adela could sleep there comfortably. On the third evening, Adela was sitting in the courtyard again when Michael appeared. He didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he stood a respectful distance away. May I join you? He asked quietly. Adela looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. It's your hospital. I can't really stop you. Michael sat down on the opposite end of the bench, leaving space between them. I want to apologize. My proposal was inappropriate. Overwhelming. I wasn't thinking about what you needed or how you felt. I was only thinking about what I wanted. Adela was surprised by his directness. Why did you disguise yourself as a homeless person? That part one still don't understand. Michael took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I almost died again. The infection from childhood had damaged my organs in ways we didn't discover until I was 30. I needed a kidney transplant. I was on the waiting list for months, getting weaker every day. He paused, his voice becoming distant. During that time, I saw the worst of humanity. I saw rich families bribing officials to move up the list. I saw people lying about their medical conditions. I saw organ trafficking networks. And I saw how society treats people differently based on their wealth. One day, a young man approached me in the hospital. He was dying too, needed the same transplant I needed. But he wasn't wealthy. He asked me if I could help him, maybe use my connections. I promised I would. But before I could do anything, he died. He was 22 years old. Adela listened silently, seeing real pain in Michael's eyes. I got my transplant a week later. I lived. He died. And I couldn't stop thinking about the unfairness of it all. So when I recovered, I decided to dedicate my life to fixing the broken healthcare system. I built hospitals. I funded research. I created programs for underserved communities. But something was still missing. I had money. I had influence. But I didn't have connection. I didn't have genuine human relationships. Everyone who approached me wanted something. Business partnerships. Donations. Access to my wealth. He turned to look at Adela directly. So I started the disguise experiment. I wanted to know what people were really like when they thought I had nothing to offer them. And for 6 months, I was rejected, ignored, and sometimes treated cruelly by hundreds of people. And then you met me, Adela said softly. And then I met you. And you restored my faith in humanity. You didn't help me because you thought I could give you something. You helped me because you saw someone suffering and you wanted to ease that suffering, even at cost to yourself. Adela looked down at her hands. I'm not special. I just did what my mother taught me to do. That's exactly what makes you special. You're the daughter of Nurse Rosa, the woman who saved my life by risking her career. Compassion runs in your blood. They sat in silence for a while. Then Adela asked, Why did you want to marry me? And please, tell me the real reason. Not the romantic story. Michael considered his words carefully. Honestly, because I'm lonely. I have everything money can buy, but I don't have anyone I can trust completely. I don't have a partner who sees me as Michael, not as Michael Sylvester the billionaire. When you gave me that bread, you didn't know who I was. You just saw a human being who needed help. That kind of pure compassion is so rare, Adela. I didn't want to lose it. So, you wanted to capture it? Own it? Keep it for yourself. Michael flinched. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible. It is terrible. People aren't possessions, Michael. You can't just collect us because we have qualities you admire. You're right. I see that now. I was selfish and foolish. He stood up slowly. I'm going to leave you alone. But I want you to know something. Whether you choose to have anything to do with me or not, I'm going to make sure your mother gets every treatment she needs. That's not conditional on your response to me. I owe your mother my life. This is simply repaying a debt. He started to walk away, but Adela's voice stopped him. Wait. He turned back. Adela stood up and walked closer to him. I don't know if I can ever love you. I don't know if we're compatible. We come from completely different worlds. But I want to understand you better. I want to know the man my mother saved. The man who disguised himself to test humanity. The man who's lonely despite all his wealth. Michael's eyes filled with hope. What are you saying? I'm saying, maybe we could start over. No marriage proposals. No grand gestures. Just two people getting to know each other like normal human beings. A small smile appeared on Michael's face. I think I'd like that very much. Adela smiled too, cautiously. My mother told me you were impulsive as a child. I see that hasn't changed. Guilty as charged. But I'm willing to learn patience if you're willing to teach me. For the first time since this whole strange situation began, Adela felt a small spark of something warm in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. She didn't know Michael yet, but she was willing to try. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael visited the hospital every day. Sometimes he would sit with Rosa, listening to her stories about nursing and her life in Mexico. Sometimes he would talk with Adela in the courtyard, sharing stories about his childhood, his father's difficult personality, and his work in healthcare reform. Adela shared her own stories too. Growing up without a father. Struggling to find work. The pain of watching her mother deteriorate. The crushing weight of poverty and helplessness. Slowly, carefully, a fragile bridge began to form between their two very different worlds. 6 weeks after Rosa's treatment began, Dr. Okonkwo called Adela and Michael into his office. His face was serious, and Adela felt her heart drop. She gripped the arms of her chair, preparing for bad news. I've reviewed your mother's latest scans, Dr. Okonkwo began. He pulled up images on his computer screen. When Rosa first arrived, the cancer had spread to her liver, lungs, and lymph nodes. It was stage 4, very aggressive. Adela's hands shook. And now? Dr. Okonkwo turned the screen so they could see clearly. And now, the tumors have shrunk by 70%. Her organ function has improved dramatically. Her blood work is nearly normal. Adela stared at the screen, not quite understanding. What does that mean? It means your mother is responding to treatment in a way we rarely see with late-stage cancer. It's not a complete remission yet, but if this trend continues, we're looking at a full recovery. The words hit Adela like a wave. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Not tears of grief this time, but tears of overwhelming relief and joy. Michael placed his hand gently on her shoulder, and for once she didn't pull away. How is this possible? She asked between sobs. Dr. Okonkwo smiled. Medically, it's a combination of aggressive treatment, excellent care, and perhaps some genetic factors. But personally, I think it's a miracle. Some patients just have a will to live that defies medical science. Your mother is a fighter. When they returned to Rosa's room to share the news, Rosa cried too. Then she looked at Michael and Adela standing side by side and smiled knowingly. You two have gotten close, she observed. Adela and Michael glanced at each other, both suddenly looking awkward like teenagers caught holding hands. We're friends, Adela said quickly. Just friends.
Rosa laughed weakly.
Mija, I may be sick, but I'm not blind. I see how you look at each other. Over the following weeks, as Rosa continued to improve, Adela had to admit her mother was right. Her feelings for Michael had evolved into something deeper than friendship. She admired his intelligence, his dedication to helping others, his humility despite his wealth. He made her laugh. He listened when she talked. He didn't try to fix everything for her, but he supported her when she needed it. Michael, for his part, had fallen completely in love with Adela. Not the idealized version he had imagined when he first met her, but the real Adela, stubborn, proud, fiercely independent, sometimes difficult, but also deeply kind, intelligent, and strong. 3 months after Rosa's admission to the hospital, Dr. Okonkwo delivered the news they had been praying for. The cancer is in complete remission. We'll need to continue monitoring for the next 5 years, but as of today, Rosa Martinez is cancer-free. The celebration in Rosa's hospital room that evening was quiet but profound. Rosa, Adela, Michael, Dr. Okonkwo, and several of the nurses who had cared for Rosa gathered together. There was cake, laughter, and many tears. As the evening wound down and the others left, Michael asked Adela to walk with him to the courtyard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. There's something I want to ask you, Michael said nervously. Adela smiled. If this is another sudden marriage proposal, I'm going to throw you in that fountain. Michael laughed. No, I learned my lesson. But I do want to ask you something important. He pulled out a small box from his pocket. Adela's eyes widened, but Michael quickly explained, "It's not what you think. Open it." Inside the box was a delicate silver key on a chain. "What is this?" Adela asked. "It's the key to an apartment. Nothing fancy, just a comfortable two-bedroom place in a safe neighborhood. I bought it for you and your mother. You've been living in that dangerous building on Jefferson Street for too long." Adela's first instinct was to refuse. "Michael, I can't accept this. It's too much. Please let me finish. I'm not giving it to you as charity. I'm offering you employment. I want you to work for me." "Doing what?" "I'm expanding my medical outreach program. I need someone to coordinate community healthcare initiatives, someone who understands what it's like to struggle to access medical care. Someone who has compassion and intelligence. Someone like you." Adela was speechless. Michael continued. "The salary is $60,000 a year to start, with full benefits including health insurance for both you and your mother. You'll work normal hours. You'll have weekends off. You'll be able to build a career while using your business degree. Why are you doing this?" "Because you deserve it. Because you're qualified. And because I want you in my life, Adela. Not as someone I'm saving, but as my equal, as my partner. Maybe, eventually, as something more, but only if you want that too." Adela looked at the key in her hand, then at Michael's face. For the first time since this whole impossible journey began, she saw a path forward that didn't feel like charity. It felt like an opportunity, a chance to build something real. "I'll take the job," she said softly. "But the apartment, I want to pay rent. Whatever amount is fair." Michael smiled.
Deal.
"You can pay $200 a month. That's way below market rate. Then consider it an employee housing benefit."
Non negotiable.
Adela laughed and shook her head. "You're impossible. I prefer persistent." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped closer and hugged him gently. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For my mother. For believing in me. For your ridiculous patience." Michael wrapped his arms around her carefully, like she was something precious. "Thank you for giving a homeless stranger half your bread. You saved my faith in humanity, Adela. That's worth more than all my money." They stood there in the courtyard as the sun set completely and stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Neither of them knew what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, both of them felt hope. 1 year later, Adela stood in front of a large crowd in the auditorium of Sylvester Medical Center. She wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress. Her hair was pulled back professionally. She looked confident, poised, and happy. "Thank you all for coming today," she said into the microphone. "I'm here to announce the launch of the Community Healthcare Initiative, a program designed to provide free medical care, health education, and preventive services to underserved neighborhoods throughout Detroit." The audience applauded. Among them sat Rosa, healthy and radiant, her hair grown back after chemotherapy. Beside her sat Dr. Okonkwo, several nurses who had cared for Rosa, and dozens of community members who would benefit from the new program. In the front row, Michael watched Adela with obvious pride and love in his eyes. Adela continued, "This program is personal to me. 1.5 years ago, my mother was dying of stage 4 cancer. We couldn't afford treatment. We couldn't access the care she needed. We were falling through the cracks of a broken system." She paused, emotion thick in her voice. But then something miraculous happened. A series of coincidences, or maybe they weren't coincidences at all, brought us to this hospital. My mother received treatment that saved her life. And I was given an opportunity to help make sure other families don't have to suffer the way we did. Adela looked directly at Michael. "I learned something important this past year. Compassion isn't just a one-time act. It's a cycle. Someone shows you kindness, and then you pass that kindness forward. My mother saved a little boy's life 25 years ago, not knowing who he would become. That boy grew up and saved my mother's life. And now, together, we're working to save many more lives." The applause grew louder. Rosa was crying happy tears. Michael was smiling so wide his face hurt. After the presentation ended, there was a reception in the hospital's garden courtyard. As people mingled and congratulated Adela on the program launch, Michael pulled her aside to a quiet corner. "You were amazing up there," he said. "I was terrified. Public speaking is not my strength." "You couldn't tell. You looked like you'd been doing it for years." Adela smiled and took his hand. Over the past year, their relationship had deepened naturally, without pressure or grand gestures. They had dinner together twice a week. They took long walks. They talked about everything, their fears, their dreams, their different perspectives on life. Adela had learned that beneath Michael's wealth and influence was a man who still struggled with loneliness, who questioned his worth beyond his money, who wanted desperately to make a real difference in the world. Michael had learned that Adela's stubbornness came from years of having to fight for everything, that her independence was born from never having anyone she could rely on, and that beneath her tough exterior was a woman capable of profound love and tenderness. "There's something I want to show you," Michael said, leading her to a small memorial garden that had been built in a corner of the courtyard. In the center stood a simple stone monument with an inscription: "In memory of all the caregivers who give without recognition, who heal without reward, who save lives in quiet moments that change the world forever." Dedicated by Michael Sylvester in honor of Nurse Rosa Martinez. Adela's hand flew to her mouth. "Michael, when did you do this?" "I had it installed last week while you were busy preparing for today's launch. I wanted your mother to see it." Adela turned and called out, "Mama, come here." Rosa walked over, leaning slightly on a cane but looking healthy and strong. When she saw the monument, she stopped and read the inscription slowly. Tears streamed down her face. "Mijo," she said to Michael, using the Spanish term for my son. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did," Michael said firmly. "You saved my life when you had everything to lose. You cared for me when my own father couldn't see beyond his pride. This is just a stone, Nurse Rosa. It can never repay what you did. But I wanted the world to know that you mattered, that what you did mattered." Rosa hugged Michael tightly, and he hugged her back. Adela watched them, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Later that evening, after the reception ended and most people had gone home, Michael and Adela stood alone on the hospital rooftop, looking out over the city lights of Detroit. "I have something to ask you," Michael said quietly. Adela tensed. "If this is what I think it is, the answer is still—" "Just listen," Michael interrupted gently. "No pressure.
No expectations."
He turned to face her fully. "Adela, over this past year, I've fallen in love with you. Not because you gave me bread when I was disguised as a homeless man. Not because you're the daughter of the woman who saved my life. But because you're brilliant, stubborn, compassionate, strong, and real in a way no one else in my life has ever been." He took her hand carefully. "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight. I'm not asking you to decide your future right now. I just want you to know how I feel. And I want to ask if you might feel the same way." Adela looked into his eyes for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. "You really have learned patience." "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe eventually. I care about you, Michael. A lot. But I'm still figuring out who I am outside of survival mode. I'm still learning what it means to have stability, to have a career, to have choices. I don't want to rush into anything." "I can wait," Michael said. "I'd wait forever if that's what you need." Adela laughed softly. "You're so dramatic. I prefer romantic." She leaned in and kissed him gently. When she pulled back, she said, "Ask me again in a year. I think by then I'll have a better answer." "A year," Michael agreed. "I'll mark my calendar." They stood together on the rooftop, looking out at the city that had witnessed both their suffering and their transformation. Somewhere below them, in hospital rooms throughout the building, patients were receiving care regardless of their ability to pay. In neighborhoods across Detroit, community health workers were visiting families who had never had access to medical services before. The cycle of compassion that had started 25 years ago with Rosa saving a dying child and had continued with Adela sharing her last piece of bread was now expanding outward in ways neither of them could have imagined. 2 years later, on a spring morning filled with sunshine, Adela stood in a small garden chapel wearing a simple white dress. Rosa sat in the front row, healthy and glowing, wiping happy tears from her eyes. Dr. Okonkwo was there, along with the nurses who had cared for Rosa, the construction workers Adela used to work with, the staff from Eddie's Diner, and dozens of families who had been helped by the Community Healthcare Initiative. Michael waited at the altar, looking nervous and happy and completely sure. When Adela walked down the aisle, no one giving her away because she was her own person who belonged to no one but herself, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. As they exchanged vows, Michael whispered, "Thank you for giving a homeless stranger half your bread." Adela whispered back, "Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible." The ceremony was simple and beautiful. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and stories of how one act of kindness had created ripples that touched hundreds of lives. As the sun set on the best day of Adela's life, she stood with Michael and her mother. Looking at the city, they were working together to heal, one person at a time. Rosa placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "You know what this reminds me of?" she said softly. "An old saying my grandmother used to tell me. Pan que das no es perdido. Bread that you give is not lost. It comes back to you multiplied." Adela looked at Michael and smiled. "She's right, you know. I gave you half a piece of bread, and you gave me back the whole world." Michael shook his head.
No, Adela.
"You gave me back my faith in humanity. That's worth more than any world." They stood together as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, 3 lives forever intertwined by compassion, coincidence, and the mysterious way that giving always, always comes back to you in ways you never expected. The circle was complete. And from that completion, new circles would continue to grow, spreading kindness outward like ripples on water, forever and forever.